Well, today marks 1 year since President Biden enacted the American Rescue Plan. The $1.9 trillion relief plan offered rental assistance, tax rebates, and direct payments to Americans. But the legislation's legacy is more complicated than the Biden administration had hoped. So we want to bring in Nikole Killion. She's in Philadelphia, where the president will be addressing House Democrats later today as they plot out their midterm strategy. Nikole, the president spoke about the American Rescue Plan last night at the DNC winter meeting. We want to play a little of what he said.
Without exaggeration, few pieces of legislation in our history have done more to lift a country out of crisis. Because of this law we passed, 41 million Americans put food on the table today. Because of this law, we helped keep a roof over the heads of 4 million people who are being evicted. We gave families what my father called a little bit of breathing room, and it worked.
So there were some bumps along the way, though. It's an awful lot of money to distribute. Some of that money was given to states, and then the states were then tasked with distributing it. And sometimes those programs weren't the best. But can you talk to us about why, some people don't feel that the program was completely successful?
Well, I think, from the vantage point of Republicans, they would take issue with the efficacy of this program. But as far as the president and Democrats are concerned, they do feel that this has been effective, whether it was an extension of the child tax credit, which they believe helped lower child poverty, whether it was providing additional stimulus and relief to everyday Americans to try to, help them pay for their groceries or their rent or whatever those expenses might be. And so from that standpoint, that is why they are touting this 1 year anniversary. But that being said, obviously we're focused, and many Americans are focused on the here and now and the current sticker shock at the pump, given everything that's happening with Ukraine and with Russia and with inflation. And so that is something that I put to administration officials earlier this week as to whether or not, them celebrating this, if that message gets overshadowed because people are so concerned about what's happening in the current geopolitical environment. And so, from their vantage point, they do feel that it's important to tout the successes that they have accomplished, but that is something that they hope resonates with the American public. But they certainly remain mindful of some of the continued stresses that exist on the American economy with respect to gas prices, with respect to energy prices. And that is something where the Democrats are looking for a path forward to try to ease some of that relief, whether it's inflationary or whether it stems from this current crisis that we're seeing. So I think you will certainly hear the president talk a lot about some of those successes when he does address House Democrats later today. But I would say one takeaway from his message last night to the DNC, at the end of his speech, he said something to the effect of, being kind of proud of the accomplishments that Democrats have made, remind people of what we've done and let's keep at it. That's kind of how he closed his speech last night. And so I think that is a theme that you will hear from Democrats going forward, whether it's from this conference or in other venues, that they want to be able to tout some of the achievements they've made, realizing that they still have a long way to go.
So, Nikole, as you know, after months of negotiations, the Senate passed a $1.5 trillion spending package, but more than $15 billion was stripped from the bill at the last minute. That $15 billion was earmarked for COVID-19 relief. Why were some lawmakers opposed to that piece of it?
Yeah, that was a huge sticking point among Democrats, actually. It had already been a sticking point among Republicans who were quite concerned about spending more money when they felt that unspent COVID relief funds that currently exist should be tapped into before the administration spends yet more billions of dollars towards COVID relief efforts. And so that was part of the issue. But the issue for many Democrats from a number of states is they were concerned that some of this money would be clawed back from their states. And that was a concern among their constituencies, among some of their governors who didn't feel that that was appropriate or necessary because they felt like they were being unfairly targeted. So that's why you had kind of at the 11th hour here after Democrats unveiled this massive government spending plan earlier in the week to fund the government through the rest of the fiscal year. When some Democrats realized that that was a part of the package, some of these clawbacks, they expressed a lot of concern. They protested to leadership. There were a lot of meetings, in fact, so much so it actually delayed this House Democratic Caucus conference. Lawmakers didn't get here into Philadelphia, I think, until like 2 a.m. Thursday morning when it was supposed to start Wednesday as they kind of haggled back and forth over this. I think the question now is, what does the White House do about this? Because earlier this week, a White House official expressed concern that if they can't get this funding, and they did see this massive government spending plan as the best way to get this funding through, that it could have consequences for what the government is able to do going forward with respect to, COVID relief, whether that is testing and whether that is moving forward in the area of therapeutics and other areas. They clearly would like to see this money allocated and designated. And so now that it has been stripped out of this plan, even though Democrats in the House intend to move forward with it as soon as next week, it would face a pretty uncertain future and an uphill battle in the Senate because, again, many Republicans there have made clear they just don't see a need for more of funding at this time.
All right, Nikole Killion breaking it down for us on a Friday. Nikole, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You bet.